there are a lot of things that can be said about Xiu Xiu's discography. With quite a few classics in their catalogue over the past 2.5 decades, Xiu Xiu have established themselves to be one of the most intriguing outputs out there when it comes to experimental music, industrial rock, art pop, folk, and in general, many different phases in which their sound has shifted over the years, with a ton of different lineup changes, but the main member behind all of it being the enigmatic figure of Jamie Stewart. From the devastating Nightmarish A Promise to an album full of Nina Simone covers, to an interesting take from the music of Twin Peaks, to noise pop with Forget, exploring Xiu Xiu has a lot going on to it, and you'll be surprised how many times has their sound changed, but still keeping the dark and obscure element that makes their work stand out and instantly recognizable. Despite the obscurity in a big portion of their works, this hasn't stopped the group of making routes and scenes outside the realm of underground, and certain works becoming critically acclaimed and respected in various music spaces. This big and eclectic catalogue can be found on their Bandcamp, with their first albums being on Kill Rock Stars and then everything else being part of Polyvinyl Records, in which we also anticipate their new album, which is not out yet while making this video, and what I can say about it is that it sounds quite promising based on the teasers. But there is also a separate Bandcamp page that is not talked about as much. This is where they put out the self-released stuff that are not part of major labels and are not categorized as full-length studio albums. This is the Xiu Xiu 69 Bandcamp page with a description that reads "Ephemeral shop specializing in exclusive, obscure, out-of-print, experimental and overlooked song." So in between their major releases, their catalog goes even deeper, with more stuff to explore. A big portion of those releases are known as drunk commentary, with Jamie Stewart basically describing the concept behind some of his classic and well-known albums while being drunk. Then there's some outtakes and instrumental type releases, and then there's albums that are just pure experimentation, like not peppered with other genres or elements of structure and composition, it's just experimental pieces. For example, there's the album Tired of Your World, Peru, which is 28 field recordings out of his trip in Peru. The album Kling Klang is recordings of 999 pink vibrators taped in a big copper sculpture, and the list goes on and on with art performance pieces and various ambient and noise works. The problem is that outside of the interesting concepts behind some of those pieces, there's not really something to write home about. At the end of the day, it's more about the ideas rather than the final results and executions, which make those particular releases significant only to those who want to fully invest into anything the band has done up until this point. It's more for the hardcore fans, and even in that case, it might not be worth investing into all of this. Even with albums such as the collaboration with Merzbow, for example, it's a pretty good album and I enjoy it, but in no way does it showcase the capabilities of both of those artists coming together. I believe that they could have done something even more compelling together and that there was room for something more special. All of that is about to change with the release of this collaboration with Susanne Sachsse called Original Sin, a performance done in the 10th of June 2018 in cooperation with Stadtgarten and supported by the Capital Cultural Fund. In this performance, the actor Susanne Sachsse, alongside with performers Jamie Stewart, Angela Seo, Vaginal Davis, and Mark Siegel, tells the story of her grandmother, Louise Brandt, with poetic texts spoken and sung from different perspectives about the conditions of living for a working woman with her family in the GDR during the division from the Berlin Wall. A very interesting concept with its political angles, bizarre and vague type of storytelling that can instantly grab your attention. And the great thing is that in this particular case, we're talking about some great musical performances as well. I wanted to find a release outside of the usual stuff from Xiu Xiu that is worth checking out for those who want to invest even further in their discography, and out of everything I've heard from the alternative Bandcamp page, this is the one. Though struggling with what to pick and try out from the additional releases, look no further. this will get you covered. This album over here feels like it has the absurdity and the discomfort of Girl with Basket of Fruit, but without the relentless chaotic elements. This release has the structure and musicality that could potentially make it a studio full-length album, but instead this comes out of nowhere right when Xiu Xiu have announced an album on Polyvinyl Records and 3 tracks have already been teased. It feels weird for Original Sin not being pushed or promoted at all, because I would go as far as to say that this is one of the best releases I've heard out of Xiu Xiu in general, from everything they've been part of. And even if the new album is going to be great, which can be the case, it sounds really promising, I doubt it would manage to be as impressive or special as Original Sin over here. There is something very captivating about this album that does have the feeling of something that has the identity of Xiu Xiu, but it's also the imagery that is depicted with the powerful performances of Susanne Sachsse, and think of this more of like a release from Susanne Sachsse with Xiu Xiu contributing to the performance side of things and giving the opportunity for this piece of art to shine and see the light of day, and it's a really wise choice. This might be so far one of the most overlooked releases of this year, and I'd like to shine a light to it because this is one of the most unique and eclectic experimental releases that we get to experience this year. Now granted, the best moments out of the album come from the tracks that are already available on Bandcamp, with a few exceptions. A part of this has to do with its inconsistency as it goes from one idea to the next, but I gotta give it to it for a performance. These sections with the track listing have a lot going on to them. It's just that due to its overwhelming variety, it's not easy to digest all the change-ups and everything that's going on, and not all the directions with its genre shifts have the same execution. But it never gets to the point where it leads to a downgrade in quality. All of the ideas provided have at least something of value, with the recurring theme of certain lyrics getting repeated over and over in the track list, keeping the flow of the narrative going and making it not feel like a disjointed mess. Categorizing any genre that gets included in this collection of tracks is more likely going to be a disservice, as this is such a diverse art and performance piece that cannot be described as simply one thing. What you can expect is a lot of spoken word and poetry, industrial instrumentation, at times being chaotic and other times minimal and straightforward, and elements of rock and classical music, just to name a few of the things that occur in various and intriguing ways for 15 tracks and in 53 minutes of material. The album starts on a really strong note with A Woman Walks Through Socialism, a very chaotic industrial song that feels like sound collage with the different sound effects that come and go. It immediately creates a haunting and uncomfortable aura, so those who are already familiar and like this side of Xiu Xiu, you're gonna find a lot of similarities with this art piece when it comes to the alienating and unwelcoming atmosphere. It just hits you with the very first track with some bizarre vocal performances and crazy pacing with just how many change-ups it has with the beats and instrumentation in just 3 minutes. Owner's Handbook works really well as a narrative introduction, with spoken word alongside church organs, weird sound effects, and once again a very haunting atmosphere that leads to an odd conclusion with all of the sounds surrounding it. Another odd track that captures the audience's attention with its unorthodox structures and expressive sound choices. Hotel Adlon has a very solid old-school industrial aesthetic to it, following up nicely with guitar parts, creating an experimental rock song that you can say has a few similarities with something you would find in some of the first Xiu Xiu material in the 2000s. In comparison to the previous 2 songs, this is not really that much chaotic, but instead focuses on very moody synth segments, which makes it a more emotionally powerful moment. Once again, there's a lot of narration style with the spoken word elements from all performers, and in general it's a welcoming change of mood to something less bizarre and more sentimental, and it still works as one of the most standout and most captivating moments over here. The next track, I Wanna Be in a Sequel, just builds sounds on top of each other, from rapid beats to layers of synths, and it's anxiety-inducing. The performances over here feel slightly more intense, matching the tone of the track being, let's say, a bit more adventurous. Its ideas could be extended to an even further degree in my opinion, as it's one of the shorter moments over here, but it still manages to create a strong impression for how imaginative it is and keeping up with the challenging but rewarding nature of this album. In RRR Sonata we get for the first time in the album Susanne talking in German while the music is a minimal piece of church organ. Definitely one of the more minimal ideas over here, as there's not much going on. It's a short track that feels more of like an interlude, an addition to the overall theme of the project, but even with its minimalism and its short runtime, this is another welcome change with another interesting and creative idea that adds to its album's benefit for having so many different elements to it and constantly keeping you engaged, anticipating what's about to come next. The next track, At Least My Problems Can Be Solved in One Bedroom, might be my favorite moment out of this whole album. A sound that feels a bit similar to Old School Swans, monotone experimental rock song with industrial soundscapes bordering to the sound of no wave. While the instrumental gets the job done on being noisy and anxious, by far the greatest part about the song is the vocal performances. The back and forth as like there's a conversation happening, and the vocal ranges from over-the-top parts to other filled with screams and anger. Very special track that highlights tremendously one of the key elements of the album, the over-the-top heavily expressive vocal performances, and this is one of the best songs in this regard, if not the greatest. The next track, Mass Power Order Spike, highlights the darker and more bizarre nature of the album, with Jamie Stewart being the main vocalist over here, whose iconic and unique voice is on great display and works really well with its dark ambient instrumental. Kinda like something you would get out of Ignore Grief, but keep in mind this was actually done way before Ignore Grief and even before Girl with Basket of Fruit, which, like I said, makes sense being close to this period of time, considering the similarities I find with the atmosphere and the more chaotic elements from time to time. But anyways, after that point I believe that the album kinda loses momentum a little bit, with tracks that I just consider good, and that only changes to the final tracks, in which I'd say it makes a pretty strong comeback. But until that point we have moments like You Want Me to Salute That Walking Pile of Puss, which has a pretty interesting percussion work. Once again we have Susanne speaking German, and it's another moment that feels like an interlude. It's really short and it doesn't really do much with its idea to extend to something even further, outside of the final seconds where it transitions to something that only has like a build up and then just ends. Unlike RRR Sonata though, it doesn't create as much of a strong impression, but at the end of the day this is another solid track, even if it's not as captivating as anything else in the album so far, but it's totally fine. The next track though, Regem Waltz, is what I would actually consider my least favorite part of the album. This is just a piece of classical music with a soothing piano, keeping up with the dark atmosphere, and that's about it. There's no vocals, there's no additional instrumentation or sound effects, it's just a solo piano song. This track feels like an intermission, just taking a break from everything else that was going on, with the amount of sounds and information gathered. This is refreshing, and I'm pretty on board with this addition. It makes sense, it doesn't feel disjointed from the rest of the album, it's just that I don't think its 5.5 minute runtime works in its benefit as the second longest track, especially since there's not really that much going on to it. At the end of the day, it's just a standard classical piece that gets the job done. I just feel that it overstays its welcome and would only keep your interest at first, just as a change up to anything else that was going on with the album prior to this point. Outside that context though, the track doesn't stand out that much by itself, it works fine within the album parameters, but I believe it is the one moment that could have been executed to an even greater extent. Following up is Revolutionary Mood in the Socialist Camp, which is one of the least intense moments, and while there are a few sound eruptions here and there, it's mostly just a really moody song, with Jamie Stewart's unique vocal delivery having a leading role once again. These subtle guitar parts add the notion of an experimental rock piece, but once again I feel like the song overstays its welcome, as it doesn't really do that many exciting things in its almost 5-minute runtime. Not that it necessarily needs to, it's a pretty fine song, but in comparison to the song structures we saw at the beginning, this doesn't make as much of a strong impression. Teenager in Love keeps on with the oddities in the sense that this is another case of a song that feels really different in comparison to anything else the album was doing beforehand. It's the most lo-fi moment in the album, with some heavily muffled, loud and distorted guitars. It would have the feel of an indie rock track recorded in a bedroom, but it only has the electric guitars and it's a bit wacky and all over the place, so it's more like another case of an experimental song. Jamie Stewart has once again the leading role on the vocals, and this could easily feel like being part of a Xiu Xiu album. Again, it's another track that by itself might not be something all that impressive, but in the context of the whole thing, it's nice to see that it still has curveballs and offers new ideas and directions. When it comes to the playable teasers out of the Bandcamp page, Which Door is the only track that didn't make me go like, holy shit, this is incredible. It still has some really cool ideas to it, with the ominous dark tone, the chaotic segments, and its pacing being kinda bizarre and going all over the place. It's just that there have already been similar moments that feel like they have been executed in an even greater way. And every playable teaser prior to that made me really want to dig deeper and listen to the whole thing, because I could see there was something quite special about this release, and it really is. And even if it has its shortcomings towards the middle, it saves some of the best for last. Rosalie is like a ragtime waltz with its classical instrumentation, but the spoken word parts elevate so much the experience. The track becomes way more fulfilling, and it's also way more cohesive and well put together. Another moment that showcases the narrative being displayed in a fascinating way by the theatrical performances, and even with the minimalism of the music being able to keep things engaging. A Taste of Life's Delirium is the most interesting track in the album outside of the excellent teasers. A great use of distant background sounds alongside what feels like also distant muffled conversations, bells, and just in general really good dark ambience. The performances once again steal the show. This occasional back and forth keeps the flow of the track in an awesome way, one of the most standout moments in terms of its narration, themes, and overall pacing. Even as the longest moment in the album, the pacing and the captivating performances are able to keep your attention from start to finish. Finally, A True Story, My Story is an excellent way to end this album. It feels really appropriate as a credits roll, with its triumphant classical music sampling, while the spoken word parts basically sum up the whole story, what it was all about. It's a nice finale that serves nicely as the end of a theatrical performance. At the end of the day, that's what it is, that's what it feels like. Susanne Sachsse and her crew delivered a unique and obscure art piece, with the music, the acting, and maybe with the visuals as well. We can just get the full picture from the music and the acting, which by itself is actually enough to create a visual representation in your head on how this could play out. It's a piece that can convey a lot to the audience. It's confusing, it's unsettling, and most importantly, it's filled with imagination. And it's great to see Xiu Xiu bringing light to one of the most exceptional releases they've taken part of, and that says a lot considering Xiu Xiu's discography. The amount of creativity taking place out of the segments from this performance is enough to make you want to explore even further their artistic visions, their pursuit of all different kinds of art forms, what they are capable of, and what if there is a catalog full of stuff like this that is yet to be explored. From what we have right now, I'm intrigued. And like I said at the beginning, if you want to go deeper into Xiu Xiu's discography and explore some of the stuff out of their alternative Bandcamp page, but don't know where to start or which one is worth your time and attention, it's this one. Like, look no further. Xiu Xiu fans, this is the one. And this is why Original Sin is, in my opinion, an essential. Let me know then in the comments what you think of this album. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.